Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all today.
Good morning.
And Aaron, would you open us in prayer, please?
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu, b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for providing us with texts of meaning and encouraging us to plumb them for blessing. Amen.
Before we get into the text again, do you remember how far we made it last time? In 50 minutes? 4 verses. We got all the way just touching verse 5. I thought that was great. We have an announcement. It'll be in the next newsletter, and that is Rabbi Aaron Bisno has a new position. And we wanted to tell you about that because the reaction has been, oh, that's great, but oh my God, will he still be at Calvary? What is the new position, Aaron?
So I'm the new senior rabbi at Ohav Shalom, which is the Jewish congregation in Allison Park in the North Hills. So, thank you. But we'll continue to serve as rabbi in residence here at Calvary for as long as you'll have me. So that's, yeah. So thank you. So thanks, Jonathon.
As it turns out, the Sabbath in the Jewish tradition is different than the Christian tradition. So you'll still be able to come here most Sundays?
Often, yes.
Often.
Yes.
Maybe in the future, if Aaron would like to, we would do a class similar to what this is, to do it there in Ohav Shalom so they could experience that.
So we'll figure out schedules.
Do you have any?
You haven't seen the last of me yet.
That's right. Change the title? Either way works. Last time, as I said, we got through 4 verses. It's just such it's a wonderful section of the text. Jacob goes back home, the 400 men with his brother Esau, doesn't know how it's going to go, hatches a plan to give him a bunch of gifts, that is bribes, over 3 sets of bribes to go to him. They finally get together, or right as they're about to get together, he changes the plans and sends the family ahead in the order of, it would be least hurtful to me, Jacob, if those children and wives die. All the way to my favorite wife at the very end, like in the back, in front of all the rest of it. And then the 2 brothers meet, and then they hug each other, they embrace, and they weep. And that's where we left it, those 2 brothers weeping. Any follow-up questions, thoughts, comments of any kind about the first 4 verses? Charles?
The men around in this painting are all quite elderly.
Yes.
Who would they represent?
That's a good question. In this image, for the reading, who would they represent?
That's fascinating.
Short answer is I don't know. Do you know?
No. But
That's probably the artist's imagination.
Although this may be an AI-generated image.
It may be an AI-generated image.
I think so. And so, right, I mean, it obviously takes place seemingly, at least this this image takes place indoors somewhere, and certainly the impression we have is they're out on the plains somewhere, or they're riverside, but they're not inside something that has a columns and balustrades and, right, a lanai, and it looks... And so these older figures, I don't know, do they come from the generation before? Do they come from generations afterwards who are sort of watching this? We're invited to appreciate that these texts can be read in multiple ways. There's a Talmudic teaching that suggests that we read them with the sense of, here I'll give you the Hebrew phrase, ein mukdam ve'ein muchar, which means there's nothing early and there's nothing late, which is to say that we're invited to read the stories but throw chronology out the window. So verse 1 didn't necessarily happen before verse 5, that kind of idea, which then allows you to sort of scramble the various stories and the teachings so that if something over here might speak to what we're reading here, we can read them at the same time, even though it might appear on the face of it that earlier generation would have no knowledge of this kind of thing. So maybe there are future generations who are learning from this encounter, like we are, about Jacob and Esau, right? So that if they were to pan back from this, we might see this classroom, as it were, in the picture, also studying that encounter or reading from it. So we don't know. It's the artist's imagination with regard to the significance of that moment. And you remember in that moment, in the Hebrew text, at least in the Torah text, that word which describes, and he kissed him, has these extra marks on top of it, which are intended to call our attention to it, lest we gloss over it or believe that we can explain it away with something overly simplistic, like a kiss. And we explored, even just last week, the different types of kisses and what they can mean. It can mean greeting and an affection, or something terribly intimate and amorous, or it could be the kiss of death, or it could be a kiss of betrayal, or it could be, right? So even that. And then we spoke just in the Hebrew about the word for kiss and the word for weapon are very close. A love bite, and actually biting through someone's jugular vein, not so very distinct from one another. And so what's happening in that moment, indeed, is the invitation that we're presented. So that's how I would read who these hoary old men are as they're watching these two brothers reconcile. Yes?
Question about the marks. Are those vowel marks, or are they just extra marks for emphasis?
They're extra marks for emphasis. In Hebrew, the vowels are subscription and superscription, which is, say, they're below and above, and they sort of dance around the letters. In a Torah text, there are no vowels, typically. That's true of most articles in a daily newspaper. They wouldn't have vowels unless the first time the word appears and it's a proper name or something of the sort. You might vocalize it so that you know how to pronounce a given proper name. That happens in newspapers here too sometimes. Usually it's strangely the second time the name appears. The first time it appears, at least the New York Times standards of style are such that the first time a name that's unusual appears, we don't get a phonetic explanation within parentheses afterwards, but it happens later. In a similar way, in a Hebrew newspaper, there wouldn't be vowels, but when there are, it's to help us understand how to pronounce it. In this case, these dots are in a horizontal line, one dot above each one of the letters, and there are only 15, I believe, times in the Torah where the scribes invoked that tradition and then repeated it as it carried forth, which is to suggest that there's something extra going on here, or that it's an opportunity for us to focus, to slow down and sort of appreciate what is within that word or that possibilities. Yeah? Other thoughts, Michael?
I will say that I don't find the notion that there's a double meaning here of kiss and bit very plausible. The rest of the passage does not suggest that Esau has hostile intentions, and I would have to say that just because there may be an etymological similarity between the two terms in the Hebrew, there are a lot of etymological similarities in language that allow for double meanings, but you can't push for double meanings unless the context of the passage suggests that they're relevant. I would say that in this case, the rabbinic source is trying to protect Jacob and the notion of the promised land, and I would really prefer the handout that you handed out earlier, Shai held, about the fact that just because Jacob is fulfilling a commitment, that does not relieve him from moral responsibility, that does not justify his immoral actions, and he is going to continue to be punished, as indeed the story of Joseph is going to touch on.
Good. So let me see if I can restate that. The first comment, Michael, I think I heard you make, is that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And while you might recognize that there could be double meanings, doesn't mean that there are, or that we need read that into it. Yes? Well, sometimes we're trying too hard to look for something that may not be there. Right? That could be. The other, the next comment Michael made was that it seems that the rest of the verse or the rest of the passage argues against Esau coming with evil intent, And so to suggest that the kiss is a weapon or that the kiss is a bite that would wound someone isn't supported in your reading of the text. And that perhaps the effort to identify this word as having multiple meanings or a depth that may or may not be there is not dissimilar from when we read about Jacob fulfilling a mitzvah, fulfilling a commandment, but having different intent. Yes, or having something else going on for him. Because one of the, I'm not trying to square the circle and make sure that we agree, but some of the commentary about this particular verse, given that our attention is called to it because of these extra dots, is that Jacob may have imagined it would go one way, and it turns out that it was a very different experience, or that he might have been conflicted or of two minds in terms of we talked about how one imagines he's rehearsed this or imagined this encounter, this reunion many times, and it turns out that in spite of what he thought Esau would do to him, or the way he thought he would, or he imagined he himself would react given the moment, turned out to be different. Yes? You had spoken about Jacob having moral responsibility, right, which is sort of an internal awareness. I'm just suggesting that the dots may be that you may be right. It may not be that it was a kiss that's loving versus a bite that's violent, but instead it could be that he approached the moment with a certain intention or imagination.
And it's also totally fine to have a different opinion, because what Aaron said is not even necessarily his opinion, but that's what some rabbinic commentators have brought up. I find that a little unhelpful, that particular that he might have bitten him. Maybe did, maybe didn't, but some other things are much more interesting to me. What Aaron and I were talking about before that he was just beginning to suggest there is, I'm looking at this from Esau's perspective and Jacob's perspective and put myself in the story, and imagine if you got into a fight with your brother, or and whatever that a relationship that was broken, your ex-wife or husband, your boyfriend, girlfriend, your sibling, your parent, and it went 20 years where you're not speaking to them, and you finally are going to meet them. How many times do you rehearse how that meeting is going to go and what you're going to say? I wish I'd said that. I was just mad and I would have burned them really good. You plan out all the ways it might go. How did Jacob think how this meeting was going to go? We know from the story he wasn't sure if his brother was going to kill him. That's probably the most likely scenario in Jacob's mind. Therefore, I will bribe him with these gifts. But I got to go back. I messed up the relationship with Laban, my uncle. I got to go back to the promised land eventually, my home place. But this monster, Esau, is there who might kill me. Oh my God, he's got 400 men. All my worst fears are coming true. That's how the story starts. And then it goes a very different direction. How would Esau have imagined this meeting was going to go? We know less from the text about what his motivation might be. Why would Esau bring 400 men? Was that your questions?
That was my question. I mean, I think Esau thinks Jacob's coming to kill me, do me harm, or whatever, so I better get my army together so that when we meet, I am prepared to take him on.
Okay, so in Steve's perspective, it's a very good point, by the way. What would Esau be thinking from his experience with his brother? Well, in the womb, he was grabbing my ankle. He was always mom's favorite. He stole my birthright when I was in a bad mood and tricked me. And then he took off out of town. And I hate that guy. Why would he be any different now than he was our entire life? Always trying to pull one over on me and get the upper hand. I really don't like him at all. So I better be ready. And I'm a grown-up now. I got my own stuff. This is his home territory too, by the way. So they're more on Esau's ground than they are in Jacob. Jacob's been gone 20 years. This is his hometown. So that seems very plausible to me. I'm just hedging my bet, so I've got my whole gang around me. So you're not going to mess with me. At least that, it suggests to me. Why else might he bring 400 men? And by the way, they don't look like the men in there. Like, I brought all 400 men with me with my cane. No, they're tough. They're meant to be intimidating, at least that. Why else would he bring 400 men with him to that meeting?
Well, I have an imagining. I've never thought about this before. Imagine that Esau has heard tell of all the riches and the wealth that Jacob has amassed. And now, in going to meet his brothers, wants to also demonstrate that he hasn't done so badly for himself either. Yes?
Oh, wait, you showed up, I'm showing up in my Lexus if you're showing up in your Mercedes.
That kind of idea, right? And then I put in mind of, gosh, I was young, but there was an interview with the artist Judy Chicago, and she mentioned that we're never as undressed as when we're fully dressed for a party. That is to say, we're never as revealed until we adorn ourselves in whatever it is that we believe is finery or will present us appropriately at the party. Yes? What if we see in Esau bringing 400 men, one who doth protest too much? Right? He's prepared for a fight, or he's prepared to impress, or he wants to shock and awe as he rolls into town. But in point of fact, what he really wants is to hug his brother once more. Yeah.
I find the use of the word intimidating to be really interesting to strike before I heard that. Because if you switch Jacob and Esau in this, like I don't see Jacob running to meet Esau, right? Because I think he's going to be intimidated by these people, right? And him, taking all of this stuff and splitting it into two, getting rid of everybody, and only bringing like the most important part of his life with them, really kind of lowers the tone a little bit and probably makes it a little bit more responsible.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because the very first verse, now Jacob looked up and saw Esau coming, and 400 men with him. And it doesn't say he's terrified, but it says his next action is to divide his company in two, which is, oh my God, we don't have time, split up because they can't kill all of us. That suggests to me he's really afraid and he's a good tactician. So another point to consider with all of this, also Aaron and I were talking about before, you've broken up with this boyfriend, girlfriend, you've had this fight with your family, you don't speak. How do you think that's going to go? Think about in your own life how many times you've played out those scenarios. Reconciliation, and this is not, I don't even think this is reconciliation. Reuniting or meeting again is probably the fairest or most accurate description. Meeting his brother again for the first time is rarely as unambiguous as we expect or want. It's not clean. Oh, Esau, it's been so long. I'm so sorry. You're sorry. Happily ever after. That's not how it goes. It doesn't go that way in the Bible. To Adam and Eve in the garden? No. Jesus? No. All these, it never just, everybody's happy and rich and well. They expect this, and it just goes a very different way. But it appears not how either one prepared for. Allison?
I think there's always a great big theme of forgiveness in the Bible. The prodigal son. And this, again, could be an example of the importance of forgiveness. And
There's a great theme of forgiveness in the Bible. You could say that is... we say anyway in the Episcopal Church that our mission is for God is to reconcile people to one another and people to God. It's a reconciliatory to bringing together, recommuning type of thing. And forgiveness is essential to that, because without God forgiving us, there is no reconciliation. In our tradition, it's Jesus that brings that about. The connection to God is different within Judaism, and I'm certainly open to having parts of the Bible speak to other parts of the Bible, but I'm not sure that's what this part of the Torah is even that interested in. How much forgiveness by God or other people, characters, have you heard so far in the story of Genesis? God sticks with the people. Hesed, steadfast love, faithful, enduring love. God has that stick-to-itness, that abiding love, but the people don't really seem to. The best type of love so far, it appears to me, and I'm very open to hearing other opinions, is Jacob's love for Rachel. He really seemed to love her, and of all the kids, Joseph is his favorite. There's not a ton of love. Remember Abraham? And who was his wife, just to remember? Sarah. Oh, she's my sister twice? It's not a lot of love like we'd say it. Valentine's Day or agape love. It's not that type of. What about Isaac? Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel. His dad was going to sacrifice him, stab him on an altar. It's not love that we would practice, or husband and wife love, child parent love, person to person love. Tell me, am I missing something so far in the story? Other than God expressing that consistent love to the people, no matter what they do, because it hasn't happened yet, but a covenant between the people. There's just a promise right now of that. There's not a lot of forgiveness happening, not yet.
You don't think when God gave the Israelites manna on their way out, and
Has that happened? We're not there in the story yet.
no, but I mean that's right in the beginning, and they instead of thanking him started grumbling again, but he kept forgiving them, and they got.
Again, that's not happened in the story yet. So far,
No, but forgiveness is.
it comes later. But it's much more prevalent, I would argue, within Christianity than it is, biblically speaking, than it is within Judaism. Steve?
But I think there is contrition on the part of Jacob.
How? Great point. There is contrition on the part of Jacob. How?
Esau coming with his battalion army, whatever you want to say, and what does he say? Okay, let's take the maids and the family and we'll divide them up, and he goes out in front to meet Esau. I see that as Jacob saying, this one's on me.
Well, he does more than that. It's a very good point. Goes out to meet him, which I have to say is the first appropriate leadership thing he's done. So, hey kids, go meet that mean man out there. Okay, I'll go. That's the right thing to do. But what does Jacob call Esau multiple times? You notice that? My brother, Esau, my old nickname, my Lord. And right when, is your point, Steve, Esau saw the women and children, he said, "Who are these with you?" Jacob said, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." So he's calling Esau Lord, and he's referring to himself as servant of Esau. So he's very clear about that, again, multiple times. They're bowing. And is that real contrition? I'm really sorry that I did this stuff. Or is it more, it feels to me, there's an element of that, but it's more, this is the really big, important, scary guy who could crush me at any moment and kill all my family and take away all my wealth, just like that. This is like the mob boss, the gang leader, the whatever, the big bad guy that you want to appease is the word rather than reconcile with. Can somebody change my mind? There is some reconciliation about to happen, or at least he's conciliatory, but it feels, what's the motivation for behaving that way? That's a way to approach this. Is it true desire for reconciliation, or is it fear, or some other similar emotion?
If it were only fear, wouldn't he send the servants along first and say, let's hope that they take out some of his men so I have a better chance? I think Jacob is saying, done messed up, and this is all on me, and I will approach my brother first.
Okay. Mary Lynn.
I feel like it's somewhere in between.
It can be both.
And I know that it sounds like, you know, you're party, but yeah, I've always felt that Jacob's looking for a way to make sure he doesn't get hurt. You know, like he's a little bit never 100% sincere.
Yeah, Jacob never feels like he's 100% sincere. So it can be both. It can be he's a little bit this, a little bit that. That's, by the way, a very Episcopal answer.
I fear in these stories that goes back to your point about Judaism and love, that sometimes it's a story of a man maturing. You know, like this story may be a story of Jacob maturing, seeing he made a mistake. He doesn't fully accept the morality of what he did or the
Yeah.
fear of what he did. But he knows it wasn't right.
That's a great point. We see that's part of why this is a great epic mythic story that has truth and meaning and resonance over thousands of years, because you see a character grow. This is my criticism of most current movies. They're all wooden characters that seem to be all-powerful or whatever, and they're just boring. Jacob is he's extremely flawed, but he's also very talented at the same time. And he seems to grow. It strikes me, to Steve's point, 20 years before, when Jacob had gone out front to put himself at risk in front of this whole entourage of people before experiencing all these other things. I don't think so. I think he became less selfish over time. Is he the perfect person? No. Not at all. Perfect dad? No. Perfect husband? No. All these things, but he does seem to have grown somewhat. Just like us. Are you don't think about yourself, because there is scientifically proven we think of ourselves more highly than we ought, and think other people's motivations aren't quite as pure as our own. Well, I did it, of course, I would do this, but other people I'm not so sure about. Looking at Jacob, looking at other people, has he grown at all from the story we first met him, grabbing his brother's ankle or heel, to today? Yeah. Would you want to be friends with Jacob? I mean, maybe to let him take you to dinner because he's really rich, but beyond that, not so much. Russ?
Well, if you read the story all the way to the end, it seems to me that what they've done is they've brokered a rather cold truce between themselves. Each one has ample cause to try to annihilate the other. The reasons that were not given, both seem to conclude that that's not a good idea. Maybe they've concluded that's not what God wants, but the text doesn't tell us that. Nonetheless, they kind of make a deal to go their separate ways. They're not together as brothers ever again that I know of.
That's right. They're not together as brothers ever again except for one thing, one event. Father's funeral. At their father's funeral, they come together. It's like, hey, that's it. Go ahead.
Observation I want to make. A few Jewish and Christian writers that I've read come to the same conclusion that what's distinctive about narration all the way back to Genesis through Hebrew Scripture, unlike the contemporary literature, the Greeks, let's say, Iliad and the Odyssey, is that characters do grow and change. You won't find a character in Homer who is any different on his last name.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most striking things about.
The classicist was laughing in agreement with your comment there. Yeah, the characters grow. we can also grow. That's part of why I really like these stories, because they're very human. Parts of you, I remember 5 years ago, we studied the book of Romans, and I could see it's like, oh my God, please can let this be over soon, because it's one long argument without any characters. These are people interacting with motivations that we can immediately understand and connect with, and they make sense, and we can see ourselves in the story. And they're also not, I wouldn't say they're all scoundrels, but they're not that great of people. Oh my God, I'm better than all these people in the Bible so far. Does anybody feel that way? Don't admit it if you do, not in church. Okay.
But even being concerned about someone might answer the question bespeaks our propensity, human propensity, to give ourselves too much credit, right? To imagine that if we were to grade ourselves on whatever scale, we tend to overestimate how well we do things, or how well we would perform, or how good we are, or the excuses we're willing to allow for our own misdeeds, indiscretions, mistakes in the past, and how perhaps unforgiving we are, or quick to assign that characteristic, that negative characteristic, to another individual. What makes these characters so interesting is that they're complex. They're not perfect, which is to say they're not gods, or they're not unchanging. And that's what sort of makes it all work. It's sort of like, I like the quote, Leon Wieseltier, who was the former literary editor of the New Republic, said that when he hears someone is of two minds on a given issue, when someone's of two minds, he thinks to himself, only two, right? That we have lots of ideas about the people in our families, or the people with whom we work, or what it is to go about this particular activity and why we're doing it, right? And we might debate whether or not intention, which we've discussed other places, or shows up in the law in certain places, the intention is of essence, whereas it might not just be the ends justifying the means, right? That's why we can see ourselves in these characters and stories, I believe. Okay.
So,
Michael, I'm sorry, 1 second. Yes.
Yeah, I'm having a translation problem here with respect to
we need to get to the gift.
verses 10 and 11.
Yeah.
Please, says Jacob, if I find favor with you, then accept my request. And then when it's, please accept my gift that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me. What is this present and this gift? I have another translation here that says, in verse 11, do take my blessing. The gift is not anything tangible according to this translation, but just that Jacob blesses Esau.
That's,
So
yeah.
what if it's
It does
not
mean the
that,
animals.
What is
Yes.
the gift?
Good. We wanted to talk about this idea of gifts and presents, and what they represent, as well as perhaps specifically what was intended in verse 11, or verse, right, a given verse. So we're going to hold that for a moment. But in much the same way as we spent some time thinking about what a kiss represents, or how we greet someone, or what's going on in our own mind as we extend our hand or wrap someone in an embrace, or what have you. Similarly, when someone shows up with a gift at your doorstep, or shows up empty-handed, or after a period of time, or what you would hope to receive, or if someone's presented you with a gift, you say, oh, it's much too much, I can't accept that. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to accept a gift that's so expensive, or all the different meanings that we read into these types of exchanges. I was going to point out, Michael, before jumping on the verse you invited us to look for, in verse 8, Jacob shows up, splits his family and his retinue up. Esau is perceived as coming with 400 men. Esau in verse 8 asks of his brother, what do you mean by all this company that I have met? And Jacob says, to find favor with my Lord. Now that could be a bribe. It could be that I want you to meet my family. I want you to understand that I come in peace. Or I want, right? I mean, we don't know quite what that means, but he seeks his favor in bringing gifts. In other situations, if you don't show up with the proper greeting or the proper gift, or you don't engage in the appropriate social niceties, things may not go your way. I think my sense is, as Jonathan has been pointing out early, sending these 3 rounds of of gifts is intended to meet with a result that Jacob believes will be favorable to him, that he'll essentially be buttering up Esau or demonstrating to Esau that he comes in a spirit of generosity or subservience, or, right, he's ready to put himself at Esau's disposal. It's not quite clear.
I think from the context, Michael, the intent of present gift and blessing, this would be, look how richly God has blessed me. And the sign, according to Jacob earlier, is God has blessed me with all these sheep, goats, donkeys, camels, etc. And so I'm going to share some of this blessing with you. So a question to ask, I, Jacob, am giving this to you. To me, this could be like hours and hours of conversation. What is the difference between a gift and a transaction? Buying something, giving something. So is Jacob offering Esau a transaction or a gift, expecting nothing in return? The gifts or the transaction parts are wealth in the form of animals. We would think of, I'll give you $10 million. Is he buying something? Or is this, what's the reason for doing this? There could be several. I don't want to be killed is one. Is that Tom's, yours? Peace between the two. Why else? Think of brothers, not two unknown. Imagine if in your family you had one sibling, brother, sister, doesn't matter, the other sibling, and one goes off and does really well financially, professionally. Oh my God, have you seen how much little Russ has done? Oh, he got his master's and then his PhD, and now he's got this job. And you're still working at the Giant Eagle. Okay. Oh, you're still living in the basement. There's that weird sibling dynamics that still exist. And so, imagine at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner. Yeah, I saw you bought mom and dad a new car a couple years ago. Oh, I saw you got them their vacation home. Saw you paid for the whole family to go. Is it that type of gift of showing up your brother? Because there's a dynamic there that suggests to me, what do you mean by all this company, this stuff? Jacob answered, to find favor. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. I don't need all your crap. I have enough, my own stuff. Keep what you have for yourself. Isn't that an interesting line? No, please, accept my present. Jacob says, I have everything I want. And in Hebrew, Esau says, I have all. Jacob says, everything I want. How have the rabbinic scholars interpreted that?
That's interesting.
I researched this myself. They view Jacob as doing I have all I need, whereas Esau is thinking about just the possession part. This is a display of wealth. Look how awesome I am. Whereas Jacob's looking at this as this is to help fulfill God's promises and covenant and so on the rest. But could you imagine the dynamic going on between two brothers? Well, I got 400 men. Oh, but I see you brought all these animals and wives and children. Does Esau have children? Wives? Somewhere, but they're showing them off now. Charles, you going to say something?
Display of residual affection between two brothers.
Is it a display of residual affection? It feels like sibling rivalry to me. Could be other things. Doesn't mean the two brothers don't love each other in the midst of showing that. And still, I mean, you know what it's like, everybody in here. When you go back to your family, even if you've been away, suddenly you become a little kid again, and all that stuff comes out. Why would we expect it to be any different with Jacob and Esau? So is this a gift, the animals and stuff, or is it a transaction, or a little bit of both? Why would you give it?
You can also see that maybe part of it is not just sibling rivalry, but it is that bond. Oh, hey, I'm giving it to you, foundation of Esau, giving it to you, and, it's kind of a loaded gift.
Great segue to the capital campaign at Calvary Church. Way to go.
Just so you know.
It's a good point. There are strings attached. If there's strings attached, is it really a gift? Not judging anybody, but it seems less like that.
I wonder.
Tell your story about the shekels to friend borrowing money.
Okay. We were talking about whether when we share something or give someone something or lend them something, and we use this language a little bit loosely, can I borrow a cup of sugar? There's no expectation that you actually return the sugar, right? Right? We use the language like that. When we engage in that, the expectation on the other end. So there's a story, and then we build up around those expectations. So there's a story about two friends in a given community back in yesteryear, and one loans the other, at his friend's request, 10 shekels. I'll pay you back tomorrow. He loans him 10 shekels. Tomorrow arrives. He doesn't have the money to return. He says, well, give me till the end of the week. Okay, his friend says, at the end of the week, he doesn't have the 10 shekels to return. He asks, well, by the end of the month, I'll be paid. I'll have the ability to pay you back. And a month goes by, and there's no return. And then a year goes by, and the friend who had loaned him money initially decides, forget it. I'm never going to see this money again. I'm not going to keep asking for it. And 5 years goes by, and finally the friend who borrowed the 10 shekels shows up to return the 10 shekels. And his friend says to him, no, keep your money. It's not worth changing my opinion of you. We get to a certain point in that.
So there's that going on too, perhaps. So Jacob finally convinces Esau, take my gifts. Come on, take it. Okay, if you insist, I'll take all this wealth. And then what could happen, if you think about it, at this point in the story? They could embrace again and like, you know what, I'm going to settle close to you, or let's set a date on our calendar to get together again. At least like, our dogs can meet, our families can meet, and all that type of stuff. You could go that direction. They could fight again, but stay, close. But what happens? Russ was suggesting that. Do either one, Jacob or Esau, appear to be very motivated to reconcile, to be close again? Were they ever really close? Not really, at least according to the story. Then Esau said, after accepting this gift, let us journey on our way, and I'll go alongside of you, right? And Jacob says, we call this a deflection? My Lord knows that my children are frail, and the flocks and herds which are nursing, they're so young, are a care to me. I'm really tired. I don't think I can go out tonight. That's what it sounds like to me. And if they are overdriven for a day, all the flocks will die. So you, Esau, my Lord, just go on ahead of me, your servant, and I'll walk slowly with all this stuff. So we'll be lagging behind according to the pace of the cattle. I mean, my God, is he laying it on thick. I just can't make it because you're so big and burly and strong with your 400 tough guys. You go on, we'll just slow y'all down. Go ahead. And I'll come to my Lord in Seir. Where's Seir? S-E-I-R. In the south, it's Jacob's territory. That's where they're going to meet. So Jacob said, Esau's territory. I said Esau's territory in the south. So Esau said, all right, you're going to show up at my house later? How about I leave you some of my guys who are with me? But Jacob said, why should my Lord be so kind to me? What a great offer. But, so Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, back home. But Jacob journeyed to Sukkoth and built himself a house. Where's that? North. Not where he lives. Hey, I'll be right there behind you. Whoop, I'm going to walk the other direction. That's what he did. So Jacob had no intention of letting these soldiers follow along to Seir because he was never going to go there in the first place. And we don't need them looking at our stuff or reporting back or just being around. So go on. Sukkoth means booze. And then Jacob came to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, the promised land. We're talking about north, but we're not hundreds, but 50 miles north. On his way from Padan Aram, and he camped in the city, before the city. And from the sons of Hamor, Shechem's father, he bought for 100 pieces of money the plot of land in which he pitched his tent. There he erected an altar and called it El Elohi Israel, God of Israel. So that's a transition phase. He's not quite there, but he's just on the outside of the promised land. So what happened to the reuniting of brothers? One went his way, the other one went his way. And they don't meet again until Dad's funeral.
One of the things that occurs that the reason that Jacob always seems to come out ahead, Esau never builds a temple to honor anybody, but wherever Jacob is, he builds an altar.
It's a good point. Jacob always seems to come out ahead. And these are maybe connected, maybe not. Jacob builds an altar multiple times. Esau doesn't, at least reportedly, build an altar. Maybe that has something to do with it, maybe not. You could also say, why does Jacob most of the time seem to come out ahead? Because he strikes me as much more manipulative than Esau is. I don't know if he's more faithful because he builds an altar. Maybe. You always want to see the good in people, Allison. I respect and appreciate that.
Around you, it's easy.
Oh my God. All right. Your 20 is coming later.
Yes.
So, God of Israel is not referring to a country. I think it's referring to Jacob.
Very good.
And they're using Jacob consistently in this text, except here, in reference to Israel. And we know from the previous chapter, he was renamed by God.
That's true. Jacob is renamed by God Israel after wrestling with the angel himself, this mysterious figure. And I think we mentioned that from that point on, inconsistently, he's referred to as Israel or by turns Jacob, and some effort has been made at various times not to create a systematic whole, but rather to point out that perhaps, in the same way as Jonathon referenced, that when we go back home or hang out with our parents, we may feel that we regress in their company to a younger version of self, and that Jacob, in meeting with Esau, maybe Israel never meets with Esau, maybe only Jacob meets with Esau, right? I'm wondering if, I'm looking at verses on the front page, the end of verse 10 and verse 11, we like the idea that they made peace with each other or they exchanged gifts or that the reconciliation is in fact as unambiguous as we'd like to imagine, but that's not the actual way that life unfolds. And maybe this, I want to see you one day before I die. I've got some unfinished business with my sibling. It may not be that we'll ever be fast friends, but I want you to understand that I bear you no ill will, or I want you to have a good life, or whatever else might be going on there. To see your face is to see the face of God.
They at least made peace with one another.
There's a rapprochement. It may be a cold peace, I think someone mentioned, or a détente or something else, but they went back and did the difficult thing.
We had neighbors across the street from we did, and I don't know what church they attend, but every fall they put a booth on their front lawn. And this year, that fall, the first time, they invited neighbors over for a small dinner.
Is this
And they called
Sukkot?
the booth
It isn't related?
and they said it was for Sukkot Day, and so I guess they did it as a day to welcome everyone. Is that the history of that celebration for that day?
Yes, there's a holiday called Sukkot in which we Jews erect a booth or a sort of a temporary kind of hut of certain architectural dimensions and character. it does, the name of this place is an echo of that practice. And that holiday, that observance is Torah-based, right? I don't think that this place references the holiday so much as they use the same name, this place and the holiday, because they are defined by these booths.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. Keep going, Aaron.
All right, I got to jump in a moment, but yes?
Yeah, I realize we're about out of time, but I'm struggling with Jacob. It seems to me that he is such a weasel and that he checks off his box, his yay peace box. And
Right.
he's like, okay, and see you never, and turns around and goes and builds a house somewhere else. I don't
Right.
know.
Jacob's a discomforting figure, right? He's a flawed hero, or he's a flawed protagonist.
And yet he's the founder of a nation.
And yet he's the founder of a nation, right? So how often do you find, I find, as I watch the news, and you realize how much of world events is determined by a given person, usually a man, his personality? Whether you like him or don't like him, whether you look in ancient history or read the front page of the paper today, how many world-changing events are a result of a given individual's whim, personality, his personal demons, his own stuff that the rest of us are now living with, right? Because ego, or because fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Right?
Corruption.
Yeah. Yeah, pride, right? I mean, embarrassment, fear of being called a failure, or being known by your weakness, whatever it is, right? Over and over and over. Okay.